So what we're looking at here is a still, and I'm going to try to click on it and get it to work. Get it to play. It's a YouTube video, and it was made by Yo-Yo Ma and Tundi, and I don't know how to pronounce the last name of Tundi's, but Olaniran or Olanarin perhaps, and this video is called Doorway, and it relates to this idea of doors and doorways, obviously, but perhaps more specifically portals. And I worked with images of doors and metaphors of doors and portals in more than one way. And this video relates to a piece on NPR called Made a Universe that involves the creation of these portals that obviously and certainly relate to this idea of space-time travel. But I wanted to talk today about the ways in which actually creating a portal or a usable portal or a usable some kind of usable communication and transportation device that can be metaphorized as portal is slightly different than describing a portal in a work of fiction. And I've talked about that before in terms of the creation of actual space-time travel devices versus the way that space-time travel devices are represented in different kinds of fiction. And the way that I'm and the reason that I'm filming it this way, but let me describe the way that I'm filming this image of Doorway, and let me see if I can figure out a way to. I need a third hand, because as you can see, with my left hand I'm using an iPad to film this image of this doorway, and with my right hand I'm using so now we've got the piece moving, and I'll say something about the rationale for this appears to be a little owl clock. Say something about the rationale for I guess the image doesn't move. So all we've really managed to accomplish is that we have music in the background now that we didn't have before. So I'll go ahead and turn that off, because that's only going to interfere with our right to publish this video. I'm going to have to. All right. So the reason that I'm using this technique in filming with the iPad camera in my left hand and the iPhone camera in my right hand is because technologically I've been having a lot of difficulties getting these clips from the iPhone into my Macintosh computer, and my iMac or whatever they call them, and I was wondering if perhaps the iPad is still more functional, and that it might be easier to get these clips from one device into the other. Now I don't know why this technical difficulty exists, because it's a Mac-to-Mac interface, and it should be easy. In other words, there should be a route, right? A route, a transportation system that's already built into the operation that is provided as part of the technology so that what I make on the iPad or what I make on the iPhone can be easily transported and transferred to the iMac. But in fact, that's not the case. And Macintosh was once very proud of its design characteristics and everything being integrated. But my experience is that things poorly integrate these days, and the reason that this is relevant to the idea of a doorway or a portal is that the portal, in particular, grants one access to a route that may not be visible or technologically accessible, right, on the veneer or surface level of the whatever reality that one is working within and that is in question. And I'm gonna move around a little bit. Sometimes these routes are available, and I want to talk a little bit about the way that I've utilized portals that are either part of the regular technological apparatus, or that exist in some way in excess of that apparatus, and that are solutions, just like using these two devices to record basically the same talk and set of images, is a solution to a technological problem. And it may be a solution to a technological problem, or just to a media interface that doesn't yet exist, right? Okay, so there's a lot that I haven't said, and maybe we'll circle back to it. But the reason that we're looking at this is I had done an internet search for this term, these two words, shaman and machine. And one of the reasons is because one of my first elaborate social media constructs was a series of web pages in which I presented two kinds of work. Well, maybe more than two kinds of work, but at least two kinds of work for observation, and some of it could be downloaded and abstracted from the website as well. And those were books of poetry and selections of music, and all of that poetry I had in quotation marks created in one way or another, and all of that music I had done the same, created in one way or another, largely with acoustic guitar, which is basically the instrument that I utilize to make music, and then again an Apple program called GarageBand, which I used to be very familiar with, but they've changed the programs, and now I'm very unfamiliar with it and don't make much music anymore. But at one time I did quite a bit, and the site utilized technologically accessible and familiar, right? You could metaphorize them as idioms of the machinery, right? So one of those idioms was simply portal as link, right? So within these poems, under certain words, I would link to other pages, either within Shaman Machine or within other images, and whether those images were moving or stationary, or other links to literary and other communicative sources on the internet, right? So just simply links, and that was so a link in a certain sense was one of the first portals that I utilized, and creating a system, even a system that is familiar, a system of links, using the technology as links, and then meta communicatively relating messages within it, is quite different than simply describing that idea of the portal as is fictionalized in Tundi Olaniran's piece, and let me go back to that again. We're having some technical difficulties because we're limited by a two-arm system here, and if I had Mahadevi's extra arms, I would be able to perform these tasks much easier. But Tundi Olanaran's, and again, I apologize if I'm pronouncing their name wrong, but I'm not familiar with this name, and I'll pronounce it probably in a variety of ways, simply because I don't know what the correct way to pronounce the name is, and it's not intended to represent anything other than my ignorance. But in this piece, Meta Universe, at least from the description provided here, it's a fiction, right? And like science fiction, right? It provides a descriptive model of a universe in which these portals exist. Now, in this work that I produced, Shaman Machine, and I'll again, using my right hand to get back to this image, which no longer exists on the web. I removed it at some point, and that's a shame in a certain way, but also fine in a certain way, because I part of the way that I work is after having created and used a portal, then I often change the relationship that one has to the access to the material, and that involves in a certain way a certain amount of destruction or revision in the access, and sometimes that means that the material disappears in one way or another, is either destroyed or lost or disappeared in some other way, and that however problematic that might be, creates for the time and material experience of my work, an element that depends upon memory and this possibility, right, of observation within a certain spatial temporal framework, and that idea of loss is important to it, and relates to certain what I would call classical modernisms, like Marcel Duproust's In Search of Lost Time, and a certain non-classical modernisms as well, that I perhaps won't discuss here, but that in one way or another relate the fragmentation of our experience and and our social conditions to issues of available technology and the rapid production and the rapid transformations of technology and viewing devices under modernism. And just to give you some examples of how that works, for many thousand years, when texts were inscribed on stone or even paper, the longevity of not just the material artifacts of these textualizations were available across centuries or millennium, but also the means of recovering them, if one had a key, for example the Rosetta Stone, right, one could even recover the meanings of those texts, whether they were ancient Egyptian or Babylonian or Linear B or whatever. But even within my lifetime, I was born before or around the time that certain kinds of recording materials emerged as means of communicative production. And for example, the 8-track tape, right, that often a vehicle, an automobile, would come with in the late 60s, and I believe it was late 60s, but at least by the early 70s, automobiles came with a 8-track tape player, already installed, in the same way that they often come with a CD player today. And of course, finding a machine that actually can play an 8-track tape today is quite a rarity. Now, one can still find record players that play vinyl, and I had quite an extensive vinyl collection. And I know individuals, and there are even individuals on the internet, who sort of whose work, as social media artists, involve the display of large collections of vinyl recordings. And for the longest time, one would hardly have imagined that vinyl would be an archaic technology in which the recording of information was no longer accessible, but it has almost become that way. And eventually, the same thing will happen with CDs, right? In any case, this work that I produced under this banner of Shaman Machine involved a lot of web pages, and within these web pages there were these portals, these links, and one could move around from site to site. And then there was also the construction of the pages in a certain way, in which there was subordination of pages, so that one could follow certain routes, and these pages would open up to pages that were only accessible via this route. So, for example, if there was a poem and it was composed of more than one page, each page might be a different web page instead of the way that you would mark the page or delineate it on a single web page. And then within those pages, so there was a kind of subordination. And then, so each page, in a sense, was opening to another door within that particular corridor or route, and each door could be conceived of as a portal, right? But this was all still within the idiom of the technology. And most of the work on this particular piece, that again is no longer available because of a lot of what I was talking about before, the desire that I have in creating this kind of work to, in a sense, reiterate or somehow represent the fragmentation, of our access to, certain modes of experience and materialities of communication, as I anecdotally narrated in the loss of the technological loss of recording devices just within my time, and I'm focused on the 8-track tapes, right? I used to have a lot of early Jimi Hendrix on 8-track tape. And it sounded pretty good, at least in the machine that I had in my car at the time. But the erasure, of this work from the web, and the erasure of its use of technologies, and this idiomatic use of technologies was again, in a sense, an allegory of the loss of, not only parts of experience from the point of view of the perceiving subject, and the traumas of the perceiving subject, or the traumas that the perceiving subject might face in, particularly marginalized subjects within the social political schemas in which we live in the United States, but also, the loss of these material technologies, right? So all of that goes into the way that I fragment my work, or tend to create situations in which things become lost, and things can always be found. There is a time machine, but for the internet, but I haven't been able to find any examples of Shaman Machine on it. So I'm going to go and see if we can find any more examples quickly of this term that certainly doesn't belong to me there. All right, so this one, this is actually my use, and this is not Shaman Machine, but this is a work published by a different entity, and then I had noted that it's from this work that I had produced online, called Shaman Machine. So. And I hadn't mentioned before, but I don't know exactly the way that these two recordings will interface in the final recording that I produce for this work, or if they will interface at all. But this is a selection from one of the poems that existed in Shaman Machine, and then here, see, there's a problem, like. In the way that it's displayed here, there really are no portals. So day one, right, is on the same page as I'm having to scroll and use my left hand to hold both devices at this time. Okay, so where are we? Okay, so there's day two. But see, under Shaman Machine, the idea of the portal would have been represented by, within day one, right? There would have been a link at the bottom, an idiomatic technological root, right? Or I'm calling it idiomatic, but it belongs to the technology. It's already there. I didn't have to invent it myself. It's a link. We know what a link is, right? All right. And then sometimes there would be missing links as well, and then that was, of course, a pun, but also this idea of a dead end, or perhaps a paradoxical figure in which a staircase leads to the origin of itself, right? In this Escherian way, right? Or and that referred to certain kinds of discourses in postmodernism as well. Anyway, in the original Shaman Machine, which this is not, this is a representation of Shaman Machine published by another entity, and I chose this entity for a number of reasons, which I won't discuss here because it becomes too complicated, but it belongs to this long performance piece, almost decades long performance piece, that I've referred to as acts, and that involves experiences in various institutions, including asylums, and is focused on the social construction of mental illness, both in the United States and abroad, but largely in the United States and largely in those areas in which I resided, playing out various and sundry roles within these institutions and industries of mental health organizations. All right, and institutional and asylums and various kinds of organizations of space and activity that are designated to subjects who are sorted into this category of mentally ill or mad or whatever one wants to refer to it as. And the subcategories within those categories. But without getting into all of that, on Shaman Machine, this portal, day 2, would have been a link on the first page and would have opened to a completely different page, right? Okay, and so here the portals are missing, and I didn't attempt to explain that to this publisher because it was both too complicated and too demanding. And then there will be a day 3, and then in the original Shaman Machine, this would have been a portal, and day 3 would have been a link within day 2. So you can see how there's a system of subordination, right? Or instead of parapraxis, right, hypotaxis, right? So there's a implicit comparative analysis of hypotaxis and subordination and subset, and the notion of portal, as opposed to this parapraxical presentation as it's presented here, in which everything has equal value and is all on the same page, right? And there may have been a play between those two as well, because I like to play between the lines and between the concepts, as well as linearly 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that's the idiomatic use of an actual construction of portal as opposed to a descriptive construction of portal. Now, in this text, I don't know if there are any references to portals or doorways or gates, and we should perhaps keep in mind that portal, in a certain way, is the modern or postmodern conceptual equivalent of what gate and bar was in William Blake. And we've discussed, these gates and bars in William Blake, and even that famous line, the doors of perception, which is from William Blake, and was used as a title in the Aldous Huxley article or essay, The Doors of Perception, when he discussed his either real or imaginary fictional experiences in consuming peyote, right? I believe it was only peyote, and there were no references to ayahuasca. I could be incorrect, but I believe that it was discussion of experiences of peyote, and perhaps implicitly there were suggestions that the peyote experience and the LSD experience, had a lot in common. And anyway, this Doors of Perception that was used as the title of the band, who we've discussed in various ways in relationship to Michael McClure, originally comes from William Blake as well, and the lines are something like if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear as it is, infinite. And how one goes about cleansing those doors or opening those gates or entering those portals becomes very much a part of the operative poetics of what I've done in a lot of different situations. Okay, so this is the second thing we've found on Shaman Machine. That one actually does belong to me. Here's another one. I think this one seems to be the same referent that we found before. Yeah, just on a different page. And this presumably is a portal in that idiomatic way, or technologically idiomatic way, or familiar way, or whatever you want to call it, and doesn't enter into the realm yet of creativity and metaphor. Here's another one. They all seem to have to do with this psychedelic mental health development. Here's another one. There was a media app at one point called Shaman Machine, and it did weird things, and I hoped not to be associated with it when I had the Shaman Machine up before it incurred its losses and entered the domain of memory and that discourse on transformative materialities. Let's see. This seems to refer to that. I'm not entirely sure. All right, that's enough of the absence of the actual Shaman Machine that I produced, and we'll move on to this particular page, which was the page. It's a larger page, from a publisher that published a magazine called And Or. And you'll be familiar, in my work, with the expression and or. And I couldn't find an example of what I contributed to and or on the web. There used to be a page of that contribution, but I think I'm going to have to demonstrate it with a different version of the text that I submitted, which I believe that I still have, but I'll have to locate. And in the time that it takes me to locate that, I can move around, somewhat arbitrarily on this page. There may be ultimately in the final video some clicks and clacks, because when I use my left hand to hold both of the recording devices, sometimes they knock together. And if I had prepared, and this hadn't been so improvisatory beforehand, we could have perhaps avoided some of that. But what I'm looking for is a representation of this piece, or a partial representation of this piece, because I don't think there's a full representation of it, that was published in this magazine And Or, and I want to describe how this piece was also a portal, but was a solution set portal. All right, here's what I have. Let me see if I can get it. All right, I think we'll have to do this one step at a time, but this is a representation of part of the piece that was published in And Or, and the objective under objective, And it may not perhaps be obvious, but this particular list, this particular poem, is actually a direction to a website, right? It's a what is it called, an HTML? And so if one translates this as a kind of acronymic representation of a web address, beginning with the H, HTT, right? P, S, colon, right? You get it? This is actually an address. Now, if we were to translate this today, if we were to translate this materiality today into the address and enter it into a web search, nothing would show up. And the reason for that is, precisely because I removed this this entire construct, all of Shaman Machine. But what this was the homepage for the actual Shaman Machine. So this is not was also a portal, or this particular part of this is, this is not, and the way that that it was articulated in terms of its presentation in and/or was as a poetry project proposal. And let me see if there's anything more in this is not that that relates to that poetry project proposal either before or after. Okay, so I think all of this, and then the code as well, which is Morse code, and translates into a message. All of this was in and/or. And but without an explanation that that the first part of the text was in fact a kind of portal, right? And this is a different kind of portal because it involves interpretation, and then we've exceeded. Okay, so this is in excess of what I published in and/or here. So it was just, this was the poetry proposal project right here. And this may still be available in print in and/or may not. I found some of their volumes, but they only operated between 2010 and 2015 under this larger banner. I'm not closing that window. Sophia Omni, and Sophia Omni, I don't know whether Sophia Omni recognized, this idea of portal, but, if you look at closely at some of my work that's available on YouTube, there are more connections with what was originally published in this and/or under this label, Sophia Omni. I'm kind of amused by their publishing statement. A different kind of publishing company. It's not easy being one of the only publishing companies in the United States to follow a distributive business model. It means that instead of simply worrying about the maximization of profits, we have to think about difficult things like the types of books we are producing, books we hope have the potential to add to the sum of human wisdom rather than diminishing it. It means we have to treat those who work with us fairly while at the same time charging a really reasonable price for our text, la, 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 la. I guess I find it amusing because, I never got paid for my contribution to the work. I got one copy of the work of the volume that I contributed to. And they had two versions of the copies. They had a a color version and they had a black and white version. And they sent me, a contributor to the volume, their cheap black and white version, as a thanks for having contributed to the magazine. So I'm not sure how that is a high standard in ethics, but so basically, they got free work, right? And then almost free, but they had to send me a black and white copy. So I don't know. To me, it seems kind of like exploitation that's similar to all the other forms of exploitation that we encounter in the business world, but I guess to someone represents something other than that. Well, I have two texts that I'm going to have to integrate, and I've been having trouble getting anything onto the desktop that's over 30 minutes long. And again, we've described those difficulties as belonging to the Mac world, and I'm noticing that I'm getting close to an hour here, or at least I'm in the 40-minute range, and I'm going to have to press on very quickly, or divide this into a couple of sections. But let's press on quickly and see where we can go. All right, so that was a media to media portal, right? One media to another, and involved a certain amount of creativity that a link doesn't involve, right? And so a certain amount of metaphorizing and playfulness that a link doesn't involve. But still, going beyond the merely descriptive idea of a portal that exists in this kind of fictionalization, right? All right, I hope that's clear. That Shaman Machine really was an operative machine, whereas Meta Universe is a representation. And all right, let's see. Let's go to where we are now. Okay, so space-time travel communication coordinates is also a real machine, and the way that it works involves a more elaborate system of construction than the portal that I built for Sophia Omni. And the reason that it's more elaborate is because this portal system, it potentially opens up, to any portal of your choosing, right? So space-time travel communication coordinate systems allows you to connect a series of communicative gestures or interpretants to any system that can recognize a series of numbers as communicative acts. So any YouTube page, right? Anyone's YouTube page can become connected or can interface with space-time travel communication coordinate systems as a 360-degree metaphor of the circle, as a metaphor of directionality, as a metaphor of life stages, as et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm having technical difficulties with my. I think I switched hands. That's what the problem is. I had the iPad in my left hand, and I had the iMac. I had the iPhone in my right hand, and in the process of changing pages, I switched, and now my hands are a bit confused because the weight of the devices is different, and the way that I was holding them in relationship to the pages is different, and I somehow lost the focus for one, and then consequently the other as I gained focus for the one. So in any case, these observational views, it can be used to communicate with me, not only here, but I can communicate with anyone who has a YouTube channel and utilize the same system, and even insofar as viewers of this channel are familiar with the system, you can also communicate with one another, beyond, my knowledge by designating a certain area within the system as a coordination, portal. Does that make sense? So I look at stuff that's on the front page at the beginning because I'm interested in the now and what's going on today, right? And this could be used as a kind of underground railroad communication system from any point, like what we imagined when we looked at the Hammond Atlas, and we said, so the compass point, for the representation of I wish I could get that little thing out of there. I don't know how I can move that out. I think the one device is on lock, and so I'm getting this annoying image of this focus and lights came out here. But in any case, a designated area within the system can be utilized as a communicative method for any pair or grouping of communicants. I can see that. I don't know why it's bothering me so much, but let me see if I can get that out of there. All right. All right. I think I've solved that problem. But I still have to press on very quickly because we're still running out of time here. But this portal, or this means of accessing multiple portals now is much more sophisticated than the representation that I produced for Sophia Omni Publishing, precisely because it can take you to a lot of different locations. It can open a lot of different portals. It can engage in multiple types and materialities of communication. All right, and even beyond what I'm familiar with, if one uses this system in a sort of hidden or illicit manner, and all of this can be done without cheating and hacking, and all of it can be done without artificially changing the representation of the numbers of views and observations. That is to say that whenever I have one view and it goes back to zero, I feel that some form of algorithmic cheating or technological hacking has been at work and isn't in a certain sense playing fairly, because in this democracy of communication, what's available should be available to all, and if one is attempting to utilize the machine as a communicative method, then having that erased is essentially, not certainly a significant, a violation, but very much on the level of like saying that your vote doesn't count, right? That and that particular form of I guess we could call Cheshire catting seems to me that is unnecessary in the process. But in any case, these portals are available and are interpretable, right? And the ways that they can be used are open. It's an open system rather than a closed system. And I've suggested, certain ways that these portals can be utilized in acts of communication. But those ways are certainly not a complete and an exhaustive categorization of what these portals can be connected to, and what other portals they can be connected to, and what other systems of arrangement and forms of communication they can be connected to and utilized in relationship to, and so and so the even technological difficulties like the one that we have been experiencing with getting information from one Mac program to another Mac program can become a means of investigating and creatively, working through potential solution sets of representation that lead to more sophisticated and more interesting means of organizing this kind of underground railroad than existed to us before, when things were easy. In other words, when I click on something and it doesn't work, sometimes that's merely frustrating, but sometimes that can be an invitation to voyage in a certain sense, right? Like it can be, it itself, even the failure of the technology to be transparent and useful to us, can be a kind of door of perception, or can lend itself, to the creation of a door of perception if we use creative imagination and solution set building as a means of finding other ways of doing things that may not have been so immediately recognizable and potentially available to us, prior to the difficulties, that we experienced in, ordinary acts of communication. And I've talked before about how, certain aspects of my dysgraphia and dyscalculia and other aspects of my difficulties in certain kinds of straightforward communication have created solutions that may be more interesting than what I would have created, had I not had those obstacles to deal with, and so that's in a certain way, what this is all about.
So I guess